So, with the latest episode of Ready to Love, Tommy decides to throw a curveball that's actually worth having in the form of having a double elimination. But as for the two men who got eliminated, it wasn't much of a surprise. So, for this episode, the ladies are the ones who get to eliminate, and what Tommy pushes them to do is to talk about their doubts with the men. And pretty much across the board when it comes to the men, the main doubt is that they're not putting enough time or effort in. This is something that we've heard about Herbert when it comes to Janelle, and now Kira jumps in terms of him not putting in enough effort. Chris and Jessica call each other out in terms of not putting enough effort into what could be. And unfortunately for both Marvin and Christopher, they still are not learning from in the past being put into the bottom, or rather their criticisms in the past. And Marvin still does Marvin still gives what feels like a genuine answer for him, but for the women doesn't feel the same way, especially since a lot of them still very much question whether or not he can have a monogamous, not intense sexual relationship with anybody. And that kind of is what, even though Katarina has an interest in him, she questions whether or not he can really be more traditional than his life is currently. Now, as for Christopher, he's still very robotic. He's still riddling off his resume, and when he goes on a date with Sierra, she just gets bored after a while. And when she mentions in terms of one of the things she likes is being gifted things like a Birkin bag, he gets so offensive and bent out of shape that really turns her off. But at the same time, he don't really know her that well, so her talking about a $10, $20, $30, I think even $40,000 bag, you can understand a little bit that hearing something like that when you barely know a person and that's what it takes to make them feel love or to love them, it's something that you can definitely feel could be, even though that was a men's thing for the last episode, could definitely be a deal breaker. With that said, not everything is doom, gloom, and you questioning why that person is there. Aries and Philip have a nice date, and even though Aries has something good going on with Chris, with Philip, she's getting that grown man energy. He talks about wanting to be a husband, having no issues, being a co-parent with both her kids and his kid, and she feels like she doesn't need to question what could go on with them anymore. Which isn't to say that now Philip is in her top, or the top rather, but she's a little bit more at ease with what their relationship is. And as for Janelle, she goes on a date with Quentin, and while she did have a bit of doubt regarding his age, since he's in his, I think his mid-30s and she's in her 40s, with him being willing to adopt, him, still putting that pressure on that she likes, her doubts about the age pretty much get blown over quickly, and they're just able to enjoy each other's company, which leads to the double elimination. The bottom three for this episode end up being Christopher, Marvin, and Marielle. Christopher, obvious, since he's missed multiple episodes or barely been featured, so it seems like there hasn't been any kind of improve for the editors of the show to create any sort of narrative, so him being in the bottom, it makes sense. Marvin, let's be real. Once he said he was a dominant in any type of capacity, and then he started to get into details about his fetishes and interests, he was on his way out. Yes, he's an attractive man, but at the same time, even if some like Katarina aren't, conservative Southern Christian, at the same time, Ready to Love is not the type that really has full-on diversity. You'll have one or two diverse people who may present something different, but everybody else, run-of-the-mill, they're not going to be for that kind of freaky shit. At least not for that freaky stuff in terms of love. Maybe a one-off, maybe some type of side piece or, something on the low to get their fix. Yeah, maybe, because as him and Lee keep having date shows, there's a potential there that somebody maybe when the camera's on around, may call him up, text him, see, hey, what you doing? But as for dating, as for choosing him on camera, it's a no. And then when it comes to Marielle, the issue that he's having right now is that he's starting to give either the homie vibes for a lot of the ladies, or in the case of Kira, she's still very offended by what he said. And granted, he tries to clean it up, but it comes to a point where you can see that they aren't going to see eye to eye, and as long as they're both on the show, one is probably going to try to get the other one out. But as for of who these three men get kicked, it ends up being Marvin and Christopher and Marielle. Even though I don't even think he really has a connection, he survives by just being the least offensive. Which leads to one more thing I have to mention. Janelle and Kara get into it this episode again, and Jessica gets dragged in, but unlike the last time, there's no threats of violence. It's just a lot of back and forth, and Tommy kind of goes in and makes it clear that y'all don't gotta be friendly, but y'all at least gotta be respectful. But I have a good feeling that what we're getting right now, it's only going to get worse, especially when they all take a vacation together and they're stuck in the same house for a weekend. Between that and then the reunion show, it's going to be entertaining. So, in terms of our predictions, I feel like for the men who may get eliminated next, again, Marielle definitely going to be in the bottom. And I want to say Herbert may join them because we keep hearing the same thing about him not putting on that pressure, him not doing enough. And it's one thing if Kira was saying that, but Janelle felt like she was getting all his attention. But both ladies are saying that, and that leads to the question, are you really doing what you need to do with any of these women? Because if not, I could easily picture him being in the bottom two, Marielle. And granted, with Marielle getting the homie vibe label, he's definitely going to be the next one out. But at the same time, there's always a chance that maybe Marielle may get a last minute connection and that may save him. While when it comes to Herbert, between Kira, Janelle, and who knows who else, they may focus on somebody who's doing more and decide, this is a type of game where if you're not pursuing me, I'm cutting you out. Especially as we get toward, I think, a little past the midpoint, so it's time to start getting serious. Now, when it comes to the ladies, honestly, I feel like they can get a double elimination as well, because right now, Kara seems like she's dead in the water. She's about to go next. But I will also submit that when it comes to Sierra, Lee, and Jessica, they also don't really seem like they're really putting much out there for the men to really latch or really desire that much. And granted, Sierra's probably the worst of them all since she hasn't really had a successful date or really any notable connection thus far. But I would even throw Lee in there because since Quentin kind of doubled down on Janelle, we haven't really seen the two fitness people really connect that much. And at this point, Lee has kind of become like the Black Widow. You go on a date with her before you end up on the cutting block. And she'll try to guide you to be a better dater, but otherwise, pretty much a date with her is a kiss of death without getting an actual kiss. And then when it comes to Jessica, yes, when it comes to Chris, she's opening up, she's getting feedback, but one of the things that have always been an issue for women on this show is that if you're a type A, like she seems to be, that's going to make it difficult for, even though these men, I wouldn't say are the most aggressive out there, really trying to be exude masculine energy besides having muscles. I just don't know if they're going to be able to really, I don't want to say handle, I don't want to say deal with, because those have negative connotations, but I don't know if they're going to be able to meld well with what she's going to put out there, especially if we actually get to see her interact with anybody but Chris, who already is making it clear that for him, it's a little bit iffy with her maybe not being able to be soft or, the big danger word, which is submissive. But of them all, definitely Kira's going to be the next out. Now, as for final couples, I feel at this point, Janelle and Quentin could definitely be a thing, and I think Aries is going to end up with somebody. But it's very hard to imagine a third couple, and like I've said many times before in these recaps, especially for this season, I see people potentially getting to the end of the season, but as for the reunion show and beyond, I feel like we're going to have another season where by the time the reunion show hits, everything pretty much falls apart. So, what's very notable for me when it comes to this episode is the double elimination. And I feel like it's something that, especially since this season surprisingly hasn't had anybody self eliminate, it was necessary. You can't have it where on a show like this, there's people who are just around because they're just not causing an issue, like Sierra and perhaps like Barriere just far. You need to really get those people out so that people really feel the pressure. People really are like trying to build connections rather than just enjoying the free lunches, the free dinners, and the free activities. So one could only hope when it comes to the ladies, since I still feel like they're kind of sitting back and letting the men do most of the work and not really offering all that much thus far, but that could just be me. I just hope that they get a double elimination too to kind of put the heat under them about really dating with some type of interest, some type of passion, rather than just kind of being there and enjoying the attention and getting some form of upset or maybe disappointed when some guy that they thought was interesting isn't doing much, when, as we saw with Jessica, it's not like they're putting that much effort out either. The next highlight for us is just starting to see the flaws and the cracks of the cast members, especially the ladies. And I point out the ladies because I feel like with the men, they've pretty much since the beginning told you who they are. And while some, like Quentin, still feel very representative, when it comes to Marielle, when it comes to Chris, I feel like even though they're not that complicated, you can get a true sense of who they are, whether they're happy, angry, on a date, or in private. The women, on the other hand, I would say Kira has been very open about who she is, especially in the form of her often probably being the one black girl in white spaces. But when it comes to Janelle, when it comes to Jessica, maybe even Aries, Sierra, I feel like they're still very much presenting a facade, putting out their representative, and maybe every now and again, like when Janelle and Kira went at it, or when Jessica and Chris kind of had their small back and forth, then you can get a sense of who they are. Beyond whatever you can easily find from Googling them, that's when you could actually get a sense of this is who they are when the cameras are off. This is who they could be when they're dating somebody. And granted, we're just viewers. We're not trying to date them or anything like that. But at the same time, you can't ever discount there should be entertainment here. And when it comes to the ladies, I feel like outside of when they have little tiffs with each other, or else the men, they're very bland. So getting to see the flaws, the cracks, them kind of coming out of their shells a little bit, it's starting to help potentially get you into investing in, hey, maybe you and this person can get together and do something, or maybe with this person and maybe you can last past the reunion show. But right now it's just baby steps, which is very frustrating, but it's something better than nothing. Getting into a low point, I do not understand why they had Lee go on a date with Marvin. I feel like since the beginning, she's pretty much made it clear that he's into some freaky shit that she isn't. And unless it's the case of she's not into it in terms of someone she's dating but wouldn't mind to experiment, I don't fully understand why they kept going on dates throughout the season thus far. It made no sense to me, and I'm kind of glad that he's gone because now we can see Lee perhaps interact with somebody else, and hopefully not somebody who's already on the last episode. Switching to the on-offense topic, a part of me wants to appreciate how the casting of Ready to Love, they try to bring some type of diversity in it by giving you someone like Marvin who has a lifestyle that maybe isn't your average lifestyle. How they bring in someone, Janelle, who's a big girl. How they bring in someone like Philip, who's not the most religious and in fact doesn't claim to be a Christian. But at the same time, as shown throughout these, 9 cast, it doesn't really work all that well when you just have that one person who's different. Philip does well as someone who's not being Christian because, hey, Kat's not Christian either. But when it comes to BB, and granted, he was a hot-ass mess, I do feel that just like Marvin and the perceptions of him led to his demise, so was if Habibi wasn't a jackass, if he just was somebody who was Muslim, it would have had the same issues of people thinking the conflicts with faith, him having to have multiple wives, and a lot of ignorant type of nonsense. And not ignorant, I'm talking ignorant. And I feel like you could even kind of see that with Kira in terms of somebody who's very bubbly, who doesn't fit into that bubble of a black woman in many ways, especially how they're often portrayed. And because of that, she's kind of looked down upon. And granted, she says some ignorant things too, like with the whole Quentin and white girls thing, but let's not discount the fact that Kira probably has a lot of white friends, as she's said, who are girls who probably dated black men who look and act like Quentin. So even though they don't really dig into that, they just dig into how dare you pursue the stereotype while getting offended about someone thinking the same about you. I don't know. I like the diversity, but I feel like they have of, what is it, 16 or 20 people, they carve out like maybe 5 or 7, don't equally mix them between men and women, and then just put them out there sort of to fail. Overall, when it comes to this episode, it doesn't necessarily improve the season. Yes, there is a need to praise how much this season is really pushing people to ask the hard and uncomfortable questions, but at the same time, it's clear many still aren't putting in that work, and a lot of people are just on autopilot. And when it comes to getting kicked, it's more so about process of elimination rather than you are actively pursuing someone that you want to be in a relationship with. You see the differences between this person and that person, and that's making for a difficult decision about who is good for now and who's good for the long term.